fun, engaging. It needs to have value for the apprentice.
That's one of the reasons why we've looked at apprenticeships for a long period of time. Whether you're a business looking at something else, you have to make sure you're ready.
I diplomatically said that you weren't
ready. Yeah, you did.
Is an apprenticeship really worth it? What are the benefits and what are the drawbacks? That's what we talk about today with Adam Rook of Professional Apprenticeships, an award-winning apprenticeship provider in the Southwest. And believe it or not, they don't work with just anyone. So yes, sometimes there are drawbacks to apprenticeships. I'm Lee, this is Leadership, Herding Cats, and let's have a listen on.
Leadership, it can be just like herding cats. Ever tried that before?
A lot of our applicants, when they come through, they're like, oh no, I've just worked at McDonald's. Oh no, I've just worked at Next. We're like, no, that's amazing. Like the amount of like challenging customers you have to deal with. You've got to think on your feet. You've got to work on your feet all day. It's quite hard, can be long days. Do you know what I mean? So there's loads of positives that we take out of people having those sorts of, jobs on their CV as well.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Especially as a smaller business, you may not be as efficient with your procedures and your processes and things. But when you bring people in from the bigger businesses that have that, and as obviously it doesn't work all of the time, but if you've got someone coming in for a bigger business that's done that, and like I say, McDonald's, there's a few others as well that are just absolutely crisp with it, aren't they? Which I think can have a real benefit to the business as well, really. So but it's would you say with their actual training aspect of those procedures though, was it how quickly did they kind of run you through that? Was it quite a thorough training process, or
so there's multiple ways that they run it, and I mean I know that they've got like apprenticeship programs and stuff they run now. So but at the time it was super efficient in terms of how they trained people up, but then there were the options for people to go onto their like management schemes and things like that. So they've taken what to some is a bit of a, is just a part-time job, and they've turned them into careers, and they've been really, really successful. So their management program is one that's been kind of, copied and recreated in multiple industries because of how well they took these young people who potentially were looking at having careers elsewhere. They enjoyed their job at McDonald's. They had the opportunity to move up to team leader and then team manager, and then eventually regional. But it's like you were saying, it's taking something that people would normally maybe use as a stopgap and having a clear and obvious path for them to progress and climb up, and they can see that, and they can see that other people have climbed up and used that. So that's where the apprenticeship program then latches onto it, because you can use that within industries to kind of upskill people and train people as maybe managers. And if people can see they're progressing, gaining new skills and potentially progressing sort of, financially.
Before we dive too deep into this week's podcast, I want to tell you a little bit about our sponsors, which is Vapor Clean Commercial Cleaning Services. Vapor Clean provides commercial contract cleaning throughout the Southwest. If you run a business with premises that need cleaning on a daily basis, then we can provide that service for you regularly, sufficiently, and consistently to the highest standard. We provide trained professional operatives that are audited and supported the right way, making sure you have the highest standards all year round. So if you want to know more, get in touch. But for now, back to the podcast.
Then that's where the value comes for both company and employer.
Which also helps combat the whole retention crisis, doesn't it? Because again, obviously, coming from our perspective in the cleaning industry, whether it's out there cleaning or in here in the office, we want to retain people for as long as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we've looked at apprenticeships and different things for a long period of time, because we want to be able to retain people and give something back. And look at ways of doing that. And I think by, like you say, upskilling people, being able to show some sort of progression, it doesn't always make it all about the money or something else, does it? There's other routes that you can move up through which benefit the business, not just the individual. And I don't think that should be seen as a bad thing. I don't think the business should not benefit at the end of the day.
It needs to be reciprocal value, doesn't it? Everyone needs to benefit from it. So and I mean, there's things like the really exciting stuff is when you put somebody through some sort of training or some sort of course, and they're getting that value from it. It's the excitement that sometimes people come back into the business with a want to better the business using their new skills. So we've done team leader training for organizations. We'll put 10 of their team leaders through team leader training.
Yeah.
And they'll all come in with projects where they've got to better the business processes. So it's a real ground up approach. The senior managers are loving it because they're getting all these new ideas about how they can better their processes. And your staff feel real ownership and ownership over the business that they actually work for. So yeah, it really does work if done, handled properly.
Yeah.
What doesn't work is when people are told they have to go on training and told they have to go on an apprenticeship, because nobody it's like, that's another thing I've got to do. But by just offering it and encouraging people's buy-in, that's the way to go about it. So.
Yeah. And again, that comes down to the communication, knowing the individual, speaking to them, to seeing what they want to achieve and what they want to do, and helping them. It's a standard question on an appraisal form, isn't it? Well, where do you want to be in 12 months time? Yeah. How can we help you get there? That's those very, very sort of cheesy questions, but can actually tell quite a lot. If you get an honest answer from them, you can dig a little bit deeper, you can find a route for them, can't you? So
on that appraisal form, there's normally a CPD, sort of section, and it's like, any CPD requirements? No, and people scoot through those. But if you actually dig deeper, there's some stuff you can really pick up and utilize there.
Yeah. And when it comes to, obviously, when you said before, when you first sort of set up with professional apprenticeships, you said there were some things that weren't being done how you sort of wanted them. What?
So the previous provider was a massive national provider. So we were, it was kind of real. It was a real apprenticeship machine. So it was kind of about working with as many businesses as possible and placing as many apprentices as possible. And I've worked for local colleges, and I've worked for other organisations and private training providers. So we set up some of the Southwest Academies as a team. We then entered the Bristol and Bath Apprenticeship Provider of the Year under that company, and we won it in 2015. There was kind of a bit of a shift after that. It became a lot more pressure, a lot more about sales, a lot more about bums on seats. Yeah. So, it was less about getting to know the apprentices. It was less about kind of, really making sure the employer was right for that young person. And that didn't sit well with us. So when we left, we set up professional apprenticeships to get to know the employers like yourselves, and to get to know what their culture's like, what their growth plans are, and things like that. And the better we know the employer, the better we can recruit for that apprenticeship, or the better we can train their existing staff. And we've entered into long-lasting relationships since we started professional apprenticeships, where it was 2 directors at the start. They're now 30 plus staff, with more than half of the team ex-apprentices. They've even got directors who were apprentices that we recruited sort of six years ago or whatever. Wow. That was one of the major things, really. Our apprentices, we know, even myself and Karina as directors, we know our apprentices very, very well. So we're able to support them better, especially recently. People need more support than ever. Do you know what I mean? Post-COVID, the mental health struggles people are going through, and financial struggles people are going through. We've added so much more in terms of sort of safeguarding and protecting our apprentices, but actually listening to them to be able to work out when they need help. So we've gone through a couple of sort of kite marks and accreditation. So we're now leaders in safeguarding. So we've got that because that safeguarding aspect is really something we're proud of. And as an organisation, we've got an 83% distinction rate. We've won awards as the region's best apprenticeship provider. We're going to take that back next year. So, and we've in our monitoring visit, we got the highest possible monitoring visit from Ofsted for our first inspection.
Wow.
Now, 2 weeks ago, we just got inspected again. I can't tell you the result. It's a shame that I can't announce it on the podcast, because that would go viral, I'm sure. But the inspection was full on. We had 7 inspectors over 4 days. The team were absolutely fantastic. All of our staff just jumped in and dropped everything. And the inspection, when it finished, we were happy with how we carried ourselves. So we're hopefully, it's got to go through certain checks because it's obviously government funding, but we'll be able to announce what we've got within the next sort of 3-4 weeks, hopefully. So
that'll be really interesting to see. So no, that's brilliant. And kind of looking back at, so obviously, that's all the good bits about apprentices and apprenticeships and things like that. You must have come across a few bad apples, let's say, or some things that have gone wrong, what's kind of the worst experience you've seen, whether it's from an employer or an apprentice?
So there's a number. I mean, there's a lot of people say that we don't do apprenticeships within our company because we tried it and it didn't work.
Yeah.
But sometimes that's because they've been with a poor training provider. The government are really trying to stamp out some of these training providers who don't offer very much support, very much training. You know, they've got very low success rates. So they're trying to stamp that out. So sometimes it can be the training provider. Yeah. So I'd encourage businesses to look at a training provider's Ofsted, just like you were going to send your child to that particular training provider. You'd look at their Ofsted, but employers need to be doing the same as well. In terms of individuals, we've had some interesting people. So you know, we do our best to make sure we properly match the young person to the vacancy, not just in terms of skill set, but in terms of personality. But you can never predict what's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? So it'd be wrong of me to go through individual stories, but I mean, on the whole, because we do more work at the start, that's why we do more work at the start. Yeah. So that 3, 4, 5 months in, there's not any issues. So the more we get to know the apprentice, the better, really. Yeah. But employers as well. There's so many employers out there, Lee, who go about the apprenticeship program for the wrong reasons. They're looking for cheap labour. They're looking for somebody just to do some data admin, data entry. And we will not work with those kinds of. It needs to be fun. It needs to be engaging. It needs to have value for the apprentice as well as for the employer. So there's a lot of people we have to say no to, and we've got to be. Well, I say I tend to have those conversations. The team don't like to have them. No. But you're having a conversation with an employer telling them that you're not going to work with them. So you have to do that in a diplomatic way. What we tend to do is have a conversation with them and we'll say, at the moment, this isn't going to quite work. But if you change this, change that, then we can help you with an apprentice. But
But it's the same as, to kind of boil it down a little bit, but it's the same as like putting social media content out there, isn't it? Yeah. It's got to be beneficial to the other person as much as anything else, isn't it? And I think with an employer, and that was actually for me, that was the biggest question I had when we were going down this route is, well, can we provide enough benefit to that apprentice? Because the last thing we want to do is bring someone on and actually not be able to provide them with enough benefit.
Yeah, and that was a conversation we had in depth, didn't we? Because we wanted to make sure for everyone that this was going to work.
Well, we originally talked 2 years ago, I think, wasn't it? When we first started looking at it, and at that time, no, we weren't ready.
I diplomatically said that you weren't ready.
Yeah, you did. Funny enough. Brilliant. But no, and I think that is just the point, isn't it? Whether you are an apprentice looking at that, whether you're a business looking at something else, you have to make sure you're ready. And when I've got, again, since from doing it, I've got other people now that are within the team where I'm thinking, well, that training could be good, that sort of apprenticeships could be good. And it's making sure that suits them and that is right for their needs, and we can give enough back along the road for it, basically, isn't it?
The thing with the upskill is that it's more the time that you invest. So the government fund 95% of the cost of the course as a minimum. So everyone's like, it's a no-brainer, bite your hands off. But then you've got to invest 6 hours off the job training per week. So they need to train from somebody more senior in the organisation. They also need time to do their coursework. And that's all well and good at the start, but it needs to be all right 6 months in, 12 months in. And it needs so it's really important with those the upskill apprenticeships that a lot of thought is put into it. And the commitment from the employer needs to be there for the entirety of that qualification. And sometimes it's not. So
no, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's making sure that it is. So and when you've kind of had these discussions with someone that's maybe not right for it, do you tend to find that they will go away, make some changes, reflect on it, and sort of have a look at ways?
We've done that quite a bit. So often people want an apprentice to do something that maybe they don't necessarily do at all, or maybe they want an apprentice to fill a role that is sort of very much sort of one aspect of the qualification. So it might be business admin, but it's very much one aspect. So we'll advise people to go away and say, how can you add in some budgeting or some finance, or can you add in some this and some of that? And they'll go away and they'll adapt to the role. And then the role suddenly, once you've spoken to most people, they understand that that it needs to be an exciting role for somebody to want to come and commit to it, especially because like if you take on a business administration apprentice for 6 months, they could go and get a business admin job after that because they've got some experience. So you need to be really kind of making it exciting. If you know the directors are going to a conference, take the apprentice. If you're going out to meetings, take them to meetings. Get them to kind of engage with every aspect of the business, and because you're never going to remember that Monday morning that you uploaded all those that data to that spreadsheet, but you are going to remember that time that you got to go to a business network meeting or a local business show. Those are the
if anyone wants to look into apprenticeships, how do they find you?
Yeah, so go to professionalapprenticeships.co.uk. So obviously my name's Adam Rook, link with me on LinkedIn, and just follow our socials. So if apprentices are looking to apply, just send their CV to info@professionalapprenticeships.co.uk.
You run your own podcast. What's the name of your podcast? What do you talk about? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our podcast is the Apprenticeship Podcast. So what we're doing is really trying to just engage new apprentices. At the moment, since COVID, there's been lower numbers of applicants. We're trying to really increase that and promote the apprenticeship program. But also, it's a good chance for employers to hear the quality of some of the apprentices that we feature on the podcast itself. So we do loads of information about sort of safeguarding as well to make sure our apprentices. So there's some quite deep subjects. The last one we did was covering knife crime due to some of the incidences that have been happening across the UK at the moment. So something for everyone. It's a light-hearted podcast with some serious issues. But just check it out on it is. So
well, we'll find it and we'll put the link in. That'll be fine.
So maybe I'll just check it out on the link. So
Brilliant.
What skills do you need as an employer? And what toolkit of skills can an apprenticeship provide? In the spirit of keeping things short and easy to consume, you're going to have to pop back next week to find out the answers to just those questions when we speak to Adam in a bit more detail. Thanks for listening, and remember, give us a follow, a like, and leave us a comment if you want us to cover anything in a future episode, and we'll see you next week.